the score ended up needing to capture the essence of a bygone era. You want that splendor, you want the melodrama. My name is Julia Newman, and I am the composer for the series FEUD Capote versus the Swans. I grew up doing music my entire life. Started young with piano lessons. I started doing musical theater from a young age. Into the Woods was probably one of my most formative experiences. I played Little Red Riding Hood. My dad would take me to New York and we would go and see shows, and I remember seeing Porgy and Bess with Audra McDonald. I also happen to be a third generation film composer. My father is Thomas Newman, my grandfather is Alfred Newman. So film music was something that I grew up around. I grew up going to 20th Century Fox and the scoring stage there. I grew up watching my dad at the studio work with players, and not just music, but really music as it relates to drama was something that was always very present in my life. Started off mainly by songwriting, but was pretty lost. I went to Cal Arts for my undergrad, but wasn't sure how any of this was meant to translate. I never saw myself really as a performer. So what was I gonna do? And I think my dad said to me, he said, if you want a career, find a way to be useful. And a girlfriend of mine, her roommate, was doing a short film and said, oh, my friend does film music. And I said yes. I had 0 demo reels, I had 0 experience, and I went home and I opened Logic and put together the crudest demo reel you could possibly imagine. Went to her, these 2 girls ended up hiring me, and I thought, wow, there is something to when you take music and you put it next to picture and it does something. Another friend of mine offered me another short film, and after doing a couple of those, I thought if I'm gonna consider this in any serious capacity, then why don't I look into furthering my education? And that's when I found myself at USC. The very last episode, episode 8, I conducted on the Newman Scoring Stage for the first time, being the first woman in my family to have conducted there. It was named after my family because so many family members of mine have recorded there. So to know that my grandfather began there, and all of these years later, I got to get up on that scoring stage and to conduct was one of the greatest privileges, particularly with my dad in the booth and players in the orchestra who have known me since I was a toddler. When I used to crawl onto that podium when my dad was conducting when I was a young girl. I owe everything to Ryan Murphy Productions. That includes Ryan Murphy, particularly Alexis Woodall, who sat next to me and really guided me through this very first TV show, who said, this doesn't work, this does work. She encouraged me, and I think that's one of the best things that can happen to a young composer, is the simple act of being encouraged, and the onus was on me to rise to that occasion. It started off, we were given a couple of scenes. Actually the opening scene of Capote's footsteps before he enters into Babe Paley's apartment. Can I make it interesting? Is there some way to make it engaged and to give this feeling of excitement? There was this great scene, and they're at La Côte Basque, which is this restaurant, and it's all of the women, all of the swans together, and it's this quick back and forth. It's them gossiping. It's so rich, but it is full of dialogue. One of my jobs in that scenario is to say, here's this specific line of dialogue. How do I take that and be precise so that you as an audience member say, okay, I paid attention to that line. The music is influenced by the change in Truman Capote. So you start off lonely and ghostly, and it's Truman Capote in an open field, utterly alone. It was Iwi sounding as an oboe, full of emotions, but we're not entirely sure what. And then, boom, you get into Truman Capote in the 1960s, and I think it's more of kind of the elegance and the groove, and I think that the way that the show opens with that juxtaposition of this pregnant sorrow, with this lonely oboe, and then kind of, boom, going into this pizzicato pattern in string. Bum 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 bum. Then these basses come in, and then these little marimbas. We're creating a vibe. We're playing to the mood, and we're playing to the scenery. That's really Truman's theme.